Hello everyone, welcome to the 129th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. And in this video, I'll be talking about infinite joy, which, pretty much sums up the whole eternal question of, what are we here for? What's the answer to life, the universe, and everything, blah, blah, blah. And I'll tell you why it's so important in a second. So let's just dig right into the material. Oops. Wait a minute. So, unconditional love is the only way, the only emotion that allows for infinity and nothingness, or existence, to be itself, to be complete. Any other feeling, any other emotion, well, it's really a feeling, tries to take something out of infinity. To remove something out of infinity is not all-encompassing, all-including. Unconditional love is the acceptance of existence, for what it is. And so it's a way to sort of, it's in the realm of existence. This is why many people say that God is unconditional love, because obviously it cannot be anything else. If it were anything else, it wouldn't be complete. It would be rejecting part of itself. Then there is the realm of experience here, for instance. Which is where we are, and that is between between 0 and infinity. That's where experience is. And the only feeling that allows you to experience everything that is within existence is joy. If you really, really drill down to your sense of purpose on the planet, or the purpose of your life, everything, absolutely everything, leads back to joy. For instance, let's say you are anti-racist. What's your motivation for being anti-racist? Of course, sure, you'll say, well, there's inequality, it's not fair. You'll claim that there are plenty of different moral or ethical reasons why you're anti-racist. But ultimately, what you envisage, what you have as a vision guiding you, is people being happy and smiling and experiencing joy, whether they're black, white, yellow, gray, whatever. And so your vision is like this southern white person, white racist person, or whatever, caricature or stereotype you have in your mind about who a racist is, and a black person, and them embracing and partying and having fun together. So any anti-movement, any movement that is, trying to fight for something, ultimately, it's all about joy. You're trying to reconnect with joy, that feeling. Now, joy is a feeling that is infinite. There's no limit to joy. You can always be more joyful. And what I mean by that is, like, for instance, if you look at all the different experiences that are available to you as a human on Earth, you're seeking joy through them. But in your imagination, there's so many more experiences where it would also be joy that you'd experience. Like, for instance, imagine flying out the window and soaring through the sky. That would bring you joy. And then imagine that you could also soar through space and go visit other planets. Now, that would also magnify your joy. And then what about from galaxy to galaxy? That would also magnify your joy. And looking at all of the different sunsets in the entire galaxy, what they look like on all the different planets, wouldn't that bring you joy? And you can compile these to infinity. But if you look at hate, for instance, or anger, or fear, all of these have limits, which are physical. That is, at a certain point, if you go too far into hatred, anger, or fear, you'll just die. You'll die of it. I mean, you'll have a heart attack. Something will happen. If you hate too much, you just commit suicide. I mean, at some point, this downward spiral into nothingness, at some point it stops. There's a limit because you just kill yourself or your body can't handle it. But joy, this ascending spiral, is infinite. And that is the only way that infinity can experience itself is through joy. There's no other feeling that would sort of allow it to experience itself but joy. Joy also is a shared feeling, which is so interesting, as opposed to pleasure. For instance, pleasure, a rapist can take pleasure in raping his victim, but he cannot feel joy, because joy is something that you spread to others, and as it spreads to others, it comes back to you, and it is magnified. Joy is meant to be shared, and that is how it grows, basically. So you can take pleasure, for instance, in eating your ice cream alone in your room, but you will feel that you'll have much more joy in enjoying that ice cream. Enjoying that ice cream with others. And that's how joy grows. Now, you remember the last episode where I was talking about beliefs and gravity. Now, the only way basically to save, quote unquote, save the world, even though it's not really save the world, but it's to ascend the world into a dimension which is above this one, is through joy, but also, very importantly, having strong roots. Because remember, I was saying that basically, if your beliefs are expanded about reality, then you have much more strength, much more weight in terms of the influence you have on reality. Because you're like this giant black hole that becomes, that has expanded in terms of all the future possibilities, all the possible futures. But if you're not rooted in physical reality, that is, you don't experience joy in the physical, then what happens is actually you have a lot of weight, but since you're not rooted in this reality, that you're not pulling anything with you. You, on the other hand, risk being pulled into the astral and go out of your body and disconnect completely with your body. It's that. So some enlightened people might have actually died out of pure ecstasy and joy. But because they were not rooted in the physical, they were like in this, how do you call it, nirvana state while meditating and completely disconnected from reality, they experienced pure bliss, absolute bliss and ecstasy, but their body was kind of left behind, and some of them maybe even died out of it and ascended, but disconnected and just went way into the astral, into that bliss. Whereas if you, for instance, listen to some of the great teachers I mean, there's this guy, Hermes Trismegistus, which is at the root of the Kabbalion and the Hermetic teachings. Well, the story goes that these villagers found this guy that was just dancing in ecstasy and joy and asked him to share his insights. And that's the whole point, is to make the link between physical joy, physical reality, and that's when you're rooted in the physical, then you can actually pull this planet. Your weight actually pulls the planet towards a better future. But if you're not rooted in the physical, then you can be very heavy in terms of your beliefs. Like I said, like you can have a lot of influence in the absolute, but since you're disconnected from reality, you're not pulling anything really. You're not really making a difference in the physical. And the whole point for us is to make the bridge between physicality and non-physicality. And so that's why it's really important to experience joy in the physical and not just in your head. And I'm the first example of this, because I can be really blissful in my thoughts for hours and be really happy in my head and all that stuff, because I imagine so many things, I have so many insights and everything is perfect there. But miserable when I come back to my body and I look around and I'm like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like being in this house, I don't like doing the cleaning and blah blah blah. So if you don't connect that, then you're like an extremely heavy weight that is not anchored to the planet, and therefore it just doesn't pull it anywhere. And so even if you, in the absolute, you have the potential to have a lot of power, you're not really all that powerful in the end. So I think that's all I wanted to share at this point. Yeah, I think that this is a really important teaching. And one exercise that I invite everyone to do is, whatever you're doing, whether it is working for an NGO, working for a company, working for this or that, try to see what joy you're trying to bring to the world, because there's always joy there. And if it isn't in, like, for instance, okay, let's say you're doing just a day job to get by, right? Well, for your family, to support your family. Well, you're doing it for joy in the end, because you want your family to be happy. You want your children to smile and experience joy. And you are doing that day job because you want to create the context for them to be able to experience joy. So one other exercise that I invite you to do is to imagine that whatever problem you're trying to solve in the world is solved. It's done. Like, for instance, you're an anti-racist and suddenly you snap of a finger, nobody's racist anymore. The problem is gone. The question you should ask yourself is, who am I and what am I doing in that scenario? So again, you label yourself as being anti-racist. You say that is your purpose, that is one of your drives. But then suddenly tomorrow, nobody's racist anymore. In that kind of world, who are you and what are you doing in that world? And that is a very, very important question, because sometimes we identify with what we're doing and it makes us confused as to, first of all, how you go about doing it and what the reasons behind it are. Because ultimately, while all of these roles can come to an end, for instance, if there's no more racism, you can no longer be an anti-racist, the only role that will never end is the magnification of joy. That is the only eternal quest, which is, by the way, incidentally, why in the US Constitution, the quest for happiness is a constitutional right. Because, and this was a very deep insight by the founding fathers, it's that it's the only quest that is eternal and that is a reflection of the nature of existence, which is infinite. The quest for joy is eternal. And so even if there is no more racism, what will you do? Well, you'll still just engage in another quest for magnifying joy. And it's always better, of course, to do it with the positive rather than the negative. Because don't forget, if you're in the negative, it's not like in mathematics where negative and negative makes positive. Negative plus negative makes negative. That's it. And so if you're anti-racist, don't forget that this is a label that you're assigning yourself. Even though you're trying to magnify joy, you're doing it via a negative way. That is, you're trying to suppress the feeling of unhappiness to allow for happiness to exist. But that is not how it works. Happiness and unhappiness are not polar opposites in that way. And deleting happiness or trying to prevent unhappiness is not leading to happiness, is not leading to joy necessarily. The only way you can do it is to switch to happiness directly. So the best way, for instance, to be anti-racist, for instance, and they've done these experiences, is to organize parties and activities which are for these two people. Like, for instance, you reach out to people that are racist and you say, would you like to engage into an experience like this huge party and all that stuff? But you have to team up with a person of color. And you'll see that in the right kinds of settings, with the right kinds of activities, people drop all of their stereotypes and their hate and everything and have a good time. The best way to be anti-racist is for a racist white person and a person victim of racism, a black person, to laugh together, to have fun together, to experience joy together. And so that's something that's really also important to keep in mind, is your way about doing it, to be anti-something. Actually, just always be pro-joy in whatever shape or form. Try to reformulate anything that you're fighting against as into something you're fighting for. And always try to find what's the joy that you're trying to magnify. It's always very subtle. But if you do that, you will have an impact that is, just incommensurable compared to the impact you're having now. And obviously, joy starts with yourself. So if you're doing something that is like a job or whatever, and you're doing it out of guilt or out of necessity or out of duty, all of these are very low vibrational feelings or reasons. The most powerful one is joy. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, drop it, because the impact you're going to have is going to be, meh. So I hope this was interesting for you. Again, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Just one last thing. So magnifying joy. Again, this is all about trying to find a strategy to experience all that is and do it with joy. And so, we think of things like war and we're thinking, oh my God, it's just impossible to experience that with joy. Well, maybe it is with certain strategies. Like, for instance, being immersed in a VR experience where all your senses are sort of captured in that. And there you can experience these quote unquote negative experiences in a positive thing, that's something that you enjoy because you're there with your teammates and all that stuff. The same with, doing a paintball fight. You can also have a lot of joy there. And so it's the joy that's important. If you don't feel joy, then something is wrong. If you feel joy, you're aligned with the universe, because the universe wants to experience all that it is, infinity, and see how all of that can be experienced in joy. And that's how you sort of go back to, gradually, the essence of things, to unconditional love. Once you can experience everything with joy. So joy is your compass. Anyway, so don't hesitate to share, like, and leave a comment if you have a question, and talk to you in the next video. Bye.